Compassion, Awareness, and Wisdom.
Unboxing Ancient Wisdom Part 2, Meditations for the 21st Century. Many different fields of study of diverse meditation exercises have been developed over the ages to help different types of people. This is a work in progress to help me organize fields of study that span 35 centuries of meditation and which are relevant today. This talk has references to Christian mysticism, but I focus primarily on Buddhism, specifically the reference document called the Visuddhimagga, known as the Path of Purification. Written 16 centuries ago, the Visuddhimagga is the foundation of meditation exercises for every Buddhist lineage. Buddhist meditation exercises are generally classified as either insight exercises or samadhi, calming exercises. But the two categories are actually interactive. Insight is the journey to spiritual perfection, and samadhi meditation exercises cultivate the inner assets that help people move forward to that goal. Fields of study in meditation which support calming and also cultivate insight include breath meditations, which focus awareness on two types of breathing, controlled and uncontrolled. Mudra, which is movement and gesture and includes qigong and yoga and sign language. Mantra, which is sound and includes chanting. Visualization includes both mental and physical formations and color and uses kasinas, which are external supports such as mandalas and symbols that help create internal visualizations. Chakra meditations work with our internal energy nodes and help regulate our biological energy. Pujas are esoteric ceremonies, such as tantric wangkurs, which include many different types of meditation exercises. A Catholic Mass is a form of puja. Study is not a standalone category in the traditional groups of meditation exercises, but I believe it should be included as such because study has been a gateway for some people to spiritual unfolding. It is also necessary for everyone to study the meditation exercises they are using to understand them properly. Study of modern subjects, such as anatomy and physiology, can also provide helpful insights into ancient meditations, such as the 32 parts of the body, and meditation on the elements, which are an ancient version of physiology.
That's the 40 classical meditations, 10 kasinas, 10 stages of the decomposition of a corpse, 10 recollections, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, virtue, generosity, deities, mindfulness of death, mindfulness of the body, 32 parts of the body, mindfulness of breathing and peace, okay, it's 30, 4 divine abidings, loving kindness, compassion, gladness, and equanimity, the 4 immeasurables, okay, arupa jhanas, the perception of the repulsiveness of food, and the defining is actually the defining of the 4 elements. 10, 10, 10. 4 Brahma Viharas, 4 immaterial states, the arupa jhanas. The one perception is repulsiveness of food. And the last one, the defining, is actually the 4 elements is one in one. Classified as calming practices because they do produce a jhana. Now it's why can they produce insight is a very curious question, because what you would need to do to get the insight, call it a vipassana insight, which has a very specific meaning. And the vipassana insights, which there are 8 of, have a very specific meaning, and that is they are a strong enough experiences of the basic universal laws of impermanence and satisfactoriness and no fixed unchanging identity to such a degree of impression on the psyche that they make a profound change. That's what insight is. And the calming meditations generally are for correcting a deficiency in your psyche. But if you actually understand the Satipatthana Sutta, which is the foundations for the what we will call insight practices, and you have a training period in those basic 4 foundations of mindfulness, you take that away with you everywhere you go. Once you've had a training period in it and you understand how to approach your practices, how to look at it, how to analyze and classify, then all your calming meditations begin to they're a foundation for insight. There are 40 of these classic, call them classic, Theravadan, old school, from the Buddha himself, if our transmissions are accurate. Okay, and there is the 10 mandalas, kasinas. We're just going to review this. The 10 kasinas, which are like medicines for. They will work for all types, but the colors, and particularly white, yellow, red, and blue. We know there are more colors than that, but in the mandalic system, in the kasinas, they just use those 4 colors. They are really, really good for hate types because they produce very beatific states of calm. They're luminous states of color in the mind once they're you go into a jhana state. Very, very closely related to the work we do with deities, with radiating colors out from centers in the body like the heart center. Okay, in fact, that's where they've come from. There is a connection there. There is an origin between the kasina practices, a direct connection between the kasina practices and deity practices. The way that the say the colored kasinas were practiced is they do say that if there was work done in a previous lifetime with kasina work, you probably wouldn't need to do anything at all. They would just sort of more or less spontaneously occur by gazing at a flower bed. Okay, now how they were originally practiced, they use flower petals. Okay, the flowers are one of the nicest ways to make a kasina. So if you choose to work with a kasina work and you want to know more about these practices online, or I just looked today, many different sources of the Visuddhimagga are online. So that's the practices are outlined in more detail in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. They would use the flower petals, either a flower, or they would take the petals off and put them in a dish of water and lay them on the dish of water and stare at that, gaze at that out in front of them, about 2.5 arm lengths out in front of them, a comfortable distance like that. That was one way of beginning to work with the way to begin to visualize color. And you would also repeat white, like say if it were white, just not too fast and not too slow, just like a mantra, steer you, to keep you in focus on that kamatana field of study, a very narrow field of study, which has a specific purpose, and that is to develop jhana, a purification of mind. Also, they just happen to develop psychic powers, those particular practices. Another way, the way that I studied, the way that I did it, I had actually some gemstones And I had, particularly for the blue, I had an amethyst and some other colored stones, and you just look at them like this with the light coming through. That actually, the one thing about the flowers is there's something incredibly soothing about the color of flowers. Part of it might be the smell, but they're really easy to take in. The advantage of the gemstone, looking through the gemstone like that, is that type of color that comes through. It's light, and it's very, very close to the type of feeling that the type of image you would get on the interior of the body. The mind's eye image of color is different than color on the external plane. And then I also did another way. You know, they used to have those little machines that you'd stick a slide into? I had one of those, and I would get a slide, take a picture of the color, and stick the slide in there. That was very, very powerful for visualization, to have that illumination like that. It was a problem with batteries. We didn't have the rechargeable batteries in those days, okay? There's a progression in this development in the visionary things that arise with the color. It generally doesn't just come up and stay. It will appear basically as some glob of color, usually a disc we're hoping for, and it'll wobble away and disappear. And after a consistent practice, we're talking you're not most likely will not be successful in your first half hour. You understand that these are, especially the working with the mandalas, that type of work is extremely subtle, and you should be prepared to spend a extended period of time if you choose to work with those practices. On the other hand, to work with each one of the four colors as a primer to get you started is a really, really good idea, because you will pick it up again later, and you'll add it in and add it in. And I have done extensive retreats with doing these kasinas. They're really, really excellent practice to get into, but very subtle. So, yeah.
What do you mean when you say when you or we work with the mandalas?
The mandalas, Ollie, can you hand me a couple of those colored circles that are on the disc, and also the maybe that heart, that flower mandala, also the flower mandala. Mandala, okay, this is good, because I forget that people might not know what mandala means, or these. Mandala means mind expansion device, and it's just an external support to be able to work with meditation. So this is a mandala, okay? This is the mandala, the heart mandala of Chenrezig. So you can see this is a very late, kind of a later tradition. The earlier traditions of Buddhism would be working with...
Are mandalas one of the kasinas, one of the 10 kasinas?
Mandala and kasina are the same thing.
Okay.
The mandala means mind expansion device, and they usually use that to describe something that's more complex in the later traditions, Mahayana, Tantrayana. But the early tradition of Buddhism said kasina, and it literally translates over as external device. This is a white kasina. This is a traveling kasina. I made this 25 years ago, and it's still in great shape. And I just did it with these prismatic colored pencils. Really durable, really good color. So the white, yellow, I think that's red.
So would you just lean that up against something in front of you while you're meditating on it?
Yeah, it depends on the size. Now the Visuddhimagga, which is only one manual that describes how to do this, would say that you would make a colored mandala a span and 4 fingers across. And cloth is okay, but what you would attempt to do is have no flaws in it. You'd want it to be as clean and pure color as you can manage. I have made some really nice discs at home that I made in my woodworking shop. And they've got at least now 15 coats of paint on it as I'm trying to get the color right with no brush strokes. And okay, it's quite a challenge, actually. You'd think it'd be easy, but it's not. And you would basically have, the way you would practice is you would have 3 of each color. And you would have a walkway, all right? Put one color at the end of each walkway, and have another one, a span and a half, 2.5 arm lengths out in front of you at an angle so that you'd be comfortable and not strain your neck. And you would just gaze at the disc. And if it was this, if it was blue, you would just repeat, not too fast, not too slow, just to hold your mind in place, like blue, just to keep you in the area, because you have a tendency, we know that, right? The mind has a tendency to wander, and we don't want to be too forceful with it, but we do want to keep it on track. Yeah, that's one of the nice things about the flower petals is actually we're trying to make the object as attractive as possible so that there is some interest in it. These are not as pleasant as flowers. The gemstones are quite limited. You get it right up by your eye and the light comes in. So the flowers are quite good. These are my portable ones. I've been reasonably good with them. I don't actually need the colors anymore, but I keep them for me to have on the shrine so that we have a set of mandalas there. And they are capable of producing the first Rupa Jhanas, and then the foundations for the Arupa Jhanas are very easy with these mandalas like this here. And each one of them has a different texture in the mind, a different feel in the mind. They're really nice. If you can get the internal work, they produce that rare state called Jhana, which there is no tiredness in, there's no worry, there's no anxiety. All the ordinary kind of unsatisfactoriness that may come from sitting still disappears when you enter jhana. It really just, and you say, whoa, I did it, and then it goes away. That's exactly what happens the first time. Oh, and then it's gone. So there's a kind of a relaxed kind of easing into it that takes repeated effort. And, I don't know, some people are much more capable of doing this type of work than others. And again, there's many different types of practices. But for hate types, this is a very good practice. So we've got 10 of these kasinas that we can choose from. We've got the 4 basic colors. And then we've got light and space. My basic and most important practice I've done with these has been light and space. And then we have the earth, water, fire, and air mandalas, which are done on the actual physical. It's not an internal feeling like the analysis of the elements in the body, which is actually how we experience the world. It's like physiology. This is actually working with the visualizations of color, elements. So you'd build a clay mound, and that you would approach it the same way. You would look at it, gaze at it, saying earth, earth, or extension, extension. and then look at it again, close your eyes, gaze at it back and forth like that. Do your walking, have one at each end if possible, and then sit down and look at it again. That's a really, really easy practice to do. And each one of these practices has a different after image, a different experience of jhana. It's a different type of experience you have. You have the same basic qualities of concentration, but what you see is different. So the sign of like the earth mandala, the visionary experience that opens up to you, it goes from fairly dense to begin with in these after images, from basically dense colors, we'll say, to more maybe you'd be looking and all of a sudden you realize that you feel as though you're gliding over a moonlit lake, solid, or you actually are staring at a group of flowers. It will be extremely clear, but you won't realize that you're looking at it until you just kind of you've moved into access jhana, where you've left behind your ordinary sense of interior kind of visualization, and it's become quite dense, and you're very calm. And then it will move through going into more crystalline. For the earth after image that you get is a series of objects will be incredibly beautiful. I was going to say just incredibly beautiful. Just couldn't imagine anything more beautiful. But it'll be a series of things, shapes, going out into space. Pegs. For me, it's usually like half bowls, domes, like domes, very ornate, going out into space. Be very spacious, like it'll be something that you haven't ever experienced before. The feeling of space in those jhanas is very, 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 very rich. And that opens up into a series of other types of visualizations as you go deeper into the jhana. They get, as you go farther in, they get thinner, more transparent, and more spacious around it. If you're going in on that type of jhana, with that type of support, the kasinas. The next is in line is kind of the opposite, the 10 stages of the decomposition of a corpse. Okay? Now, you can't go into such deep absorption on the decompositions of the corpse as you can with these beatific mandalas. They're for very deep concentration. So the corpses are medicines to correct certain types of attitudes or excess types of infatuation with the body. And the point is not it isn't supposed to be, it is actually, I think we would call it an ascetic practice, but its purpose is to free up energy that's tied up in unproductive fantasies and delusions, so that you will be able to work more unobstructed and profitable on your path to happiness. Okay, so each one of those 10 meditations on the decompositions of a corpse heals a certain type of vanity. The practice on the stage of the corpse where it's getting all blotchy helps reduce or eliminate the vanity of perfect skin. I spent a lot of hours in front of the mirror as a teenager looking at my skin and horrified that I didn't have the right shaped chin. say nothing for the combing of hair. Now, I don't know if everybody else is like that, but we do have these things now. In teenagers, it's expected, but when you get to be 50 and are trying to look 30, there's some serious problems that need to be addressed. So these practices are to address such problems. Okay. Okay. So now we're to this 10, the 10 next group of 10. So we did 10 kasinas or mandalas. Let's say kasinas or mandalas, external supports. 10 stages of the decompositions of a corpse, which probably no one would do because you actually need a real corpse to do it in 10 stages of decomposition. We don't have that there. There is actually another practice that is called the nine stages of the decomposition of the corpse, which is actually part of the Satipatthana Sutra that is actually designed to be a visualization. And you would do that type of practice is the visualization. It's quite vivid descriptions of what the stages are and what's happening with it. You would imagine yourself like that, doing that, like you imagine your body going through those stages of decomposition. It has the same. It's called asubha. It is a practice on the unbeautiful. It is to make corrections in delusion about body beautiful. Okay. The next set of 10. It's called it's divided into. And it isn't divided into two groups. It's just listed as 10. But the first 6 of the 10, called the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, virtue, generosity, and deities, are taken together as one group of practices. Then this is very unusual here, and I really always wondered about this. The Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, virtue, generosity, and meditation on deities, they say shouldn't be taken by a person who isn't actually had a transcendent experience or has had initial awakening, because they won't really understand what these things are. That is stated. Now we had Jerry asked about the deities. It brings up the deities because we don't really think of the early tradition in Buddhism having anything to do with deities, but it is a standard practice that the Buddha taught. It is actually, you can see the parts of these later practices. You can see the pieces starting to come together here. We got the colored kasinas, which are but into complex mandalas in the body. Now we got deities. Now, these are approached in a little bit more basic way, but they are celestial beings. They are highly evolved beings that are living in heavenly realms, we'll say, but are accessible to us, are living amongst us, but aren't visible to us, but they are attracted to people with good vibes, with loving and kindness, or virtue, or generosity. Another good wholesome people. And the way that this practice would be done is that you have them, like when we do these Wongkors, we attract deities into this environment here. And when I'm in the bush alone and I haven't seen anybody for 6 months, I know that in my center there are deities around. At least I feel there are deities around, and you use them to stand witness to your virtue, to your practice, to keep you on track. The idea we would behave in such ways that intelligent, wholesome beings could never criticize our behavior, and then the deities are going to stand witness to their. You imagine them looking over you and keeping an eye on you.
Keeping you safe.
And that's it. they do. The idea that you are asking for mind blessings or safety from them, there's a certain amount of protection. They do have some abilities to manifest changes in material. That is the tradition. Okay, they're there because of their generosity, their future, their virtue, their faith, their generosity, their previous studies, their intelligence, their evolved beings on a higher level, and that they are very keen to be near humans that have a good vibe, and they're very it's an interesting practice, but you can see why it might be restricted to people who have very high attainments. I don't think they would be aware of them. Maybe they would. So those the Buddha Dharma Sangha is it generosity, liberality, or virtue, and deities are generally suggested that you don't practice those unless you have had a transcendent experience, or then what would be called a sotapanna, or a stream enterer. The next one's mindfulness of death, and then mindfulness of the occupied with the body, mindfulness of breathing, and mindfulness of peace.
Can you elaborate more on like how you would meditate on sangha or virtue? Like, what?
Yeah. Okay. Buddha Dharma Sangha. Buddhas, in this case, would be considered the founder of the Buddhist lineage, Gautama Buddha. And you would like the way that I practice that practice is that I'll just show you one in brief, not because it is actually detail has been put into what the Buddha is at this stage here, and it's gigantic. His abilities are stupendous. But in, like say, in my monastery in Bangkok, they just say, look, you know, it's respect for the teachings that he provided to us. And when you take a look at these teachings, and especially the Satipatthana, you're saying, whoa, this is 2,500 years ago. I mean, this is amazing that they knew this 2,500. I mean, the earth was flat 2,500 years ago. And there was a dome over earth, and the stars were angels looking through the dome in the earth. And as Richard Feynman would say, we've come a really, really long way since that attitude about the angels sitting on a glass dome covering the earth. You know Richard Feynman? He's one of my heroes. He's a Nobel Prize winner in mathematics that was able to prove quantum physics. To prove the quantum physics. He says we've come so far since those primitive ideas. He said we now know that the angels are far, far farther out into space. And you know, that seems like a joke, but it's kind of our level of understanding. So yes, the Buddha was, they go through all psychic powers and his omniscience and all that, which is a bit large. But when I do it very simply, thinking, I just reflect on the teachings I have received. And this, especially the Satipatthana. And I think how brilliant that these practices, and useful even today, are. And that took quite something. Also, that he actually was able to start a lineage that survived up for 2,500 years. That's the way I reflect. And then the Dharma, of course, are his teachings, the teachings that he handed down to us, and they have been, you know, obviously propagated and extended and commented on, and commentaries and new practices evolved into it, but all with the basic principle of the downgoing and overcoming of suffering. And the Sangha is a special Sangha. It's the Aryan Sangha. It's not like particularly what we know as the Buddhist order, the bhikkhus. It is actually any beings who have had an awakened experience, that are beginning to awaken, that actually have grasped the teaching, actually understand it. So those are the three. And we have to appreciate those awakened beings, because as far as life goes, for me, prior to my coming in contact with these ideas, and certainly my teachers were awakened to some degree, they were a very, very bright light in a very, very dull world for me. There was no kind of look like much of a escape. So we have respect for the Sangha, for the dedication that has been carried on. As we say, like, who ever thought I would be a teacher? Oh, but all my teachers have died off, so I'm the only one left, right? So there's a new generation coming up, and they do learn stuff, and then they again have an opening experience. They become part of the Aryan Sangha. They begin to get more skillful in the way that they can teach. They evolve the teaching beyond what I have been able to accomplish. The next generation will be more in tune, we hope, and evolve this Buddhist teaching for our culture in ways that I'm just beginning to grasp is already happening. So in the virtue, like generosities and virtues, that is a reflection that you would do on your own virtue. It's a reflection of yourself. To see the good things that you have done, like, say, for you, for all the work you've done on this to help create this environment and bring in food, and your work in your personal practice that you do here, helping people. That's all virtuous activity. And anytime there's any doubt about yourself, you can reflect on the good deeds that you have done, the strength and the importance, then sharing that with other people. That's very valuable in our world. So you reflect upon your own virtue. And the generosity is the same thing on your giving. How much time you've given to other people is an important reflection to have.
So these six, the Buddha, Sangha, Dharma, the virtue, generosity, and the deities,
Yes.
they're more contemplations than absorptions. Like it would be hard to go into a jhana state.
No, you do go into a jhana state, yeah.
And there's still mind activity contemplating? Or
Yes, mind's totally active in jhana. It's no problem. It depends on what jhana you're in. Thoughts to do that. It also depends what you entered jhana. What you are carried into jhana. What practice you were doing when you went into jhana. We're going to go over this again. Like, how you learn is by asking questions and repeating things over and over again from different angles. That's very much different jhana for metta practice than it is for the decomposition of a corpse. Yet they both produce an absorption. They both produce an absorption. Metta produces the first three jhanas. But it's a jhana on feeling. It's a feeling. It's a strong, wonderful, what we would call as heart-opening experience. Where the meditation, say, on the color yellow is also a wonderful feeling. It has a feeling with it, but now you're actually in it's more like it's a color. You're sitting in a color. It's a wonderful feeling, but it's different than metta. It's a different practice than metta, where the meditation on death produces all 8 jhanas. Interesting. Interesting. The meditation on death is one that I do, regularly. It's recommended to do. Well, a hate person wouldn't want to practice death, but I think actually it might actually be recommended for all types, the one on death, but probably not. I think probably not. This is so the mindfulness of death is number 7 in this 10 reflections. So with 10 kasinas, 10 stages of the decomposition of a corpse, 10 reflections. The first 6 are the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, then virtue, generosity, and deities, then mindfulness of death, then mindfulness occupied with the body, mindfulness of breathing, and peace. Now, mindfulness of death is quite a valuable practice. It is done to just remind you that you're mortal, and that your times are limited, and that I think we can say that pretty much everyone dies, but it doesn't seem like you're going to die, right? It isn't like an immediate kind of thing that you're terrified of. Well, I hope not, but it's there. It's going to happen, and the way you do that practice is you reflect back to all the people that you know who have died. You just go through the list, all the people you know who have died. My mom died, my dad died, my sister died, Cecily died, all these teachers died, Namgyal died, and then there are historical figures of in Canada and the States and other parts of the world. Gandhi died. People come and people go, and you that kind of sets it in, and you reflect upon the fact that you're going to die, and that straightens the energies out. Puts you into a very calm state. It really kind of stops the fantasies and wetness of the being, dries it up a little bit, and you go in, and from there you move from one end to the other. I quite frankly, I can't understand why it produces all 8 jhanas, but it would be, the foundation would be there. The vibe from that would be a cleaning. You understand, it's a cleaning, it's a straightening up of the energies. And if you do get into this practice, you really do get clear with it. You really do get calm and peaceful, like accepting. And then it's very easy to slide into deeper and deeper states of concentration as that type of attitude as a foundation. Mindfulness occupied with the body. That is one I do a lot of. I'm just going to go through, and we'll just do a mini meditation, quick mini meditation of this one here. This is how you do the learning curve on this is a bit high, but we're pretty good with anatomy with our culture. So what you would do is you would go through and you'd put your awareness in the head hairs. Basically, you would pull one out and look at it first to see what its shape was. Body hairs, you would look at the hairs on your body, around, get a good idea. Magnifying glass would be useful. The nails, your fingernails and your toenails, you would just take a look at them, reflect on them. Your teeth, you can look in the mirror, just feel them. Go from one tooth to the other, all of your teeth. I think I've got maybe 16 left. Right? So I don't have the full set anymore. And then your skin. And your skin, you imagine putting your fingers underneath your front lip and kind of taking your fingers and moving all around underneath, you're kind of peeling it up underneath, go all around. Just move your awareness as an imagination of your skin around underneath the surface of the skin on your whole body. Okay, and then you would go into the muscles in the body. You would study anatomy, you would learn all the muscles, you would learn how they work, and you would try and put your awareness in the individual groups. For that one there, if you're sitting down, you'd want to lift your leg a little bit, maybe move your foot, try and feel which groups of muscles are moving so you become more aware of them. And then you would go into the ligaments. They lash the bones together. And then all the bones in your body, one at a time. Now the ones in the ears are very subtle, we know that, but most of us are aware of our bone structure. And you will actually be able to feel the outlines, you'll be able to feel all the bones in your body. They will come awake. Then you go into the bone marrow. And then awareness in the kidneys. Then you put your intention, your mind, in your heart. Then your liver. And then what is called fascia, which is a sheathing of the abdominal cavity, the sheathing around the internal organs, and muscles under the skin throughout the body. Just little packets. You've seen them in meat, that creamy white colored stuff. Then the spleen, which is shaped like a cow's tongue, is tucked to the bottom side of the stomach. Then the lungs. Then you go to the digestive tract, the whole thing, from the mouth to the anus. Then the mesentery and mesocolon, those are the strings which attach the digestion tract to the back surface of the walls of your body. They're kind of like strings that hold these organs in place. Then you go into the undigested food. Then the digested food. And then the brain. Then the bile, which in this case is historically described as oil, of which there are two kinds. Local bile is in the gallbladder and concentrated near the liver between the heart and the lungs. And free bile, which soaks the entire body, exudes to the outside of the skin, and separates like oil over the body with the exception of the teeth, nails, and hard, dry skin. And then phlegm. The phlegm is, in this case, the flexible lining of the stomach. That's what protects it from the acid eating through. And then pus includes the substance itself and any damaged areas of the body. Then the blood. Then the sweat. Then the fat. Then the tears. Grease. This is the oil that secretes on the palms, you know, how oily you are, fingerprints, soles of the feet, nose, forehead, and shoulders. Saliva, nasal mucus, oil of the joints, and urine. That's 32. You would reflect on each one of those. You'd memorize the list. Well, have it in front of you on paper first, then you would gradually memorize it. You'd go through it in this order, and then you go through it in reverse order. And that's really quite fascinating when you actually have gotten this thing down to memory, because you get very, very concentrated doing this practice here. And as you get concentrated, you usually get a bit thick and kind of forget stuff, and you don't want to move. You don't want to move to the next one. So this is a really good way of engaging the left side of the brain in a right side of the brain contemplation, and to use both sides and develop a deeper concentration using the intellect and a list that you have to move through in order, and then also have concentration, because you really get focused on these organs. You can actually feel them in your body. Okay, You have to know where they are, the color, the shape, location, okay? That's how that practice is done. And that's for overcoming excessive infatuation with the body, understanding that it's a collection of pieces. Now we can. So after you've done this, and you're very, very concentrated, and see, one of all the practices have a little bit different quality to them. One of the qualities of this particular practice is, I assure you, you will never get bored doing it. You just don't get bored. It's very interesting, and if you get a little bit stuck on one, or one's hard, you just move on to the next one. If after you practice for a while, one of these parts seems to be extremely interesting, like I go through periods where a different one is just absolutely fascinating. You can stay on that for a whole kind of session. And oil of the joints was the one that's just absolutely amazing for me to go through. Having studied the anatomy, putting my awareness in each joint in the body. 200 or so joints in the body, putting your awareness in. Well, that takes 2 hours, right? An hour or two. The muscles is really good done walking or standing, because you can feel them working. And if you get modern anatomy books, you can tell how they're attached to above the kneecap and kind of swirl around on your thighs and go through a hole in your hips and attach to your lower back. So your lower back things are quite often attached to your thighs, because that's part of that whole mechanics of doing that. So there's a lot of study involved, and it's implied that this practice is to overcome again infatuation with the body. It's implied that when you do this, when you finished a big round of it, that you review and try and find out where you live. Where are you in this body? That it's like a koan, actually. It doesn't seem to be completely answerable. Okay, so you understand, like it creates a sense of mystery with that question added on the end. Now, that's implicit. Explicit, implicit is that this is incredibly good for health, and it's very, very good for working with vipassana. This is part of the Satipatthana Sutta. This is part of the Manual of Insight, one of the main practices occupied with the body. It really, really helps you open up a sensitivity to where emotions manifest in the body. Especially, you'll notice, if you become very, very sensitive with all the groups of muscles, that is most definitely tightening of little strings and strands of muscles in some anxiety states. And this type of practice makes you very finely aware of those groups of muscles, which gives you a very heads up before it gets too far and it becomes chronic. If it isn't already, it probably already is in most of our bodies, that there are areas that are already chronic. But this, understand, this is a very explicitly, it's for overcoming excess sensuality and a question of where we actually are in the body. Where is consciousness, or where is the being, or what is consciousness? Where is the mind? Where is it? I mean, you can get into neurophysiology and all that, but this is like a koan, a question that you use to propel you to awakening. If you're going to have an awakening, it's not going to come from practice. It's going to come from the question that arises from the practice. It's the question that's going to propel you, not the process, not the actual crafted practice. That gives you a field of study, but it's the question that's going to bring into existence a change. It's always a question. That's how you get the real powerful concentration that you get from vipassana insight. the jhana or the concentration, the level of power of the mind and a vipassana insight is way beyond anything of the rupa or arupa jhanas. It's an ultra high state of perception that you need, that you develop, that comes about when you're doing insight practices such as questioning where you actually are in the body, and it becomes a stable question in your mind that's absolutely 100% takes over all your energies in the body. Okay, so this is a valuable practice to know. That's occupied from the bit. Mindfulness of breathing, anapanasati, listed as a calming meditation. It also is most often used as I think the most important of these practices of all of them is anapanasati. Okay. But if you're going to have, if you should have 3 practices, you should do, and the ones that I would recommend that you become familiar with are this practice, 32 parts of the body practice, which is so important. It's incorporated into the bhikkhu's ordination. It's the only really formal meditation a bhikkhu is a member of the order is given. And it has been suggested this is the only practice that the Buddha actually invented himself. All the rest were borrowed from other traditions. It's been suggested that, I don't know, but that is an idea that has been presented to me by some quite competent scholar teachers. Anapanasati is that awareness of in and out breathing related to pranayama, anaprana, anapana, prana, same word, awareness of in and out breathing. There's a whole sutta devoted to that that's quite valuable, also alternative to the Satipatthana Sutta, and it would be doing insight with high degrees of concentration and practicing insight on the movement of the jhanas and what occurs while you're in jhana and coming in and coming out of jhana. So it's more tranquilized, it's a more civilized way to approach insight. Satipatthana, or bare insight with Satipatthana, bare insight with Satipatthana, not dry, bare, is pretty harsh. I wouldn't recommend that go in that direction. I'd recommend doing some form of having ability to do concentration work, jhana work is really very much enjoyable. Now, if you want to make a comparison, well, what is the difference between the two? Well, the difference in the two between doing jhana work with insight, call it dual practice, tandem practice, or just bare insight, it's like bare insight is like going to your large shopping center mall with all these little stores in it. I don't know if you have one here, you probably do. And starting at the front door, and your friend is at the back, and you're going to get to him. Well, you're just basically going to ignore everything along the way. All your friends you meet along the way, you say, hi, I'm busy. And you just keep right on going, right through, no stops, no side, nothing. And you meet your friend at the back door. Samatha vipassana is like you go in the store and you stop at Starbucks, have a cup of coffee. You look at those shoes for a little while. You talk to your friends for a few minutes, you take your time, you enjoy your walk through, and then you meet your friend at the back door. Or if you want to look like it in dental, my dentist up north, he's got this incredible widescreen TV that's just up on your head you look at. He's got these amazing headphones that block out all the sound of the drills. He doesn't believe in any pain at all. She doesn't believe in any pain at all. And gives you as much of this Novocaine as you need so that there's no pain. And then there's old school where they just go and take a pliers and rip it out. So those are actually fairly close analogies. And you can understand if you're going to do bare insight vipassana, you should be in a protected environment with competent teachers who know what's happening with you to support you, and support you, interview you, and guide you through those more physically painful and emotionally upheaval, direct, very fast practices. It's not necessarily fast. That's really not a very good, call it direct. Depends on your parami. It depends. We can't tell. We can't tell how fast people are. We have to accept that we all have different needs and capacities, and some people are going to progress more rapidly. Some people are just going to be gaining parami, but everyone's working toward the same goal. The meditation on peace is actually one that I don't know too much about, but it actually is another one of those that will bring about full awakening.
Lama Lodro, you were going to mention, you said there were 3 that you highly recommend.
Anapanasati, metta, and 32 parts of the body. So you got 1, anapanasati, brightening the mind. Metta, heart opening, and 32 part of the body, more like understanding the body. But so brightening the mind, 1 for overcoming hatred, and 1 for overcoming greed. So when you're practicing, if you do have a real bout with hatred, you can, if you've established a practice, you can go in that direction. So I'm going to read the Metta Sutta out here. This is the beginning of the Metta practice. And I would suggest that if you do the Metta, you download the Metta Sutta. It's on my website, by the way, which we have a little ticket here for a free download. So this is the aside from giving this beginning of the 32 part of the body practice, meditation occupied with the body in the ordination, which most people don't practice right away. Traditionally, everyone learned metta first and got very competent with it because they were practicing in the woods with the tigers and the wild animals. And those animals are actually very sensitive to vibration, hatred states, or love states. There is a great deal of protection from wild animals in a loving state. So the monks, before they went out to practice the practice, would be, given this, and they would practice it. This is just the sutra itself. This is just the attitude. So in order to create a feeling or a view or an approach to life, metta is something that's very, very important for a human being to understand. And it is this. It's really beautiful. Really beautiful. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Nibbana, the goal of Buddhism, is translated as peace by some monks. Let them be able and upright, straightforward, and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud and demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, and that's part of that deity practice there. And this is it, wishing, or praying, this is wishing, praying, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is no longer bound to blind becoming. That's a really good attitude to help. That could actually save you a great deal of suffering in your life if you held to these principles. Now, it says radiating unbounded. The next set of the practices is that you would say, may all beings be, may this being, you start with yourself, be free from, may I be well and happy, is the simplest form of the prayer. It gets more complicated. You can say, may I be free from ill will, may I be free from anxiety and distress, and may I guide myself to bliss. That is another form of the prayer. Ill will, the definition of ill will from the Oxford Unabridged Dictionary, means enemy making in the mind. That's ill will, enemy making in your mind. Mine doesn't do that anymore. That's very fortunate. It's very irritating. It's very, very crippling. Okay, but you wish that. So metta practice is a good practice to do. So if you know this practice here, like there are 4. This is the Brahma. The next group of 4, 10 kasinas, 10 stages of the decomposition of the corpse, 10 reflections, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, virtue, generosity, deities, meditation on death, meditation occupied with the body, meditation on breathing, meditation on peace, 4 divine abidings. This is the loving and kindness. And then there's compassion, gladness, and equanimity. And then the 4 immaterial states. Now the immaterial states are these sometimes called today rupa, arupa jhanas. And I keep harping on this jhana thing because it's really, really important on your unfolding to understand their importance and to think about actually developing jhana. It will change your life. There are very deep states of healing. The very deep states of healing. The longer you can stay in them within reason, the more healing that you'll get from it. Until you get the idea that instead of you being a loser, you're a winner. Somehow the unconscious is healed by a continual washing of these very deep states of incredible clarity, and in the lower levels blissful. Then they get more spacious, and then they get emptied. So it goes dense body bliss, incredible bliss, liquid bliss in the body, warmth, heat, to less warmth, heat, to more stable body but feels empty, watching thoughts just come and go away, and the senses arising and passing away with no being caught in it at all, just watching the flow. And then you're going into arupa, where you're going into space, basically. You lose contact with the body. The body's gone. You're into space. And then you're into luminescencies. And then you're into this blackness. Black, dark, inky black, rich, a rich bathing, of soothing bathing. It's very, very deep. You're really, really removed from all the ordinary senses and feelings in the body, and then there's neither perception or non-perception. I have entered all of them. I'm not a master. I'm a master of the lower jhana. Okay, so the jhana is very valuable in that respect. It is a purification in its own right. It's also the still pool, that when a stone gets chucked into it, it's very obvious. Where ordinary consciousness is like muddy water almost. Things are being shook up all the time. When one ends, another one starts, or there seem to be four going at the same time, and you get so gray, you get so like dulled that it's hard to have any clarity, you know. So the jhana is a way of giving yourself some breathing space, as Saint Teresa of Avila said. You don't have to ask Mother Superior to go there. That's what she actually said. You know, it's you. It's there all the time, and you can go there.
How is your sleep affected if you meditate that? Like, or has it become an issue?
We're talking about this. The body needs sleep time for repair. It has to have a certain amount of sleep time for repair. If you're sitting in these, and it depends on, I think people actually are overtired and exhausted, and they need the sleep. There are other people that are using sleep to escape from their own emotions and their physical pain and difficulties. They just don't want to be there. So they sleep a lot. In that respect, this jhana work, this type of insight jhana mixture that I do, it seems to give you, revitalize your enthusiasm for life, so you actually don't want to go to sleep before you actually really need to go to sleep. You definitely need less sleep. But again, the jhana work and that does give you a thrill. It's an enthusiasm for life. The energies aren't crazy. They're smooth, they're high, your mind's clear, you've got an excitement in the body. It's hard to explain this, but there's just this excitement. It's like the day you got out of school in the spring when it was a hot day, or the night before Christmas. That kind of excitement is kind of pretty there. It wanes a little bit, come back again, and that is one of the characteristics of the lower jhana absorptions, where you can still function and move around, yet you've got this happening in the background all the time. Yeah, so I'm whatever it is that this being has accomplished. It's a really good way to live, and it's a really good way to explore, and it's done through these traditional practices. One of the ways that you practice the loving and kindness practice, or any of these practices, there is a stage where you, after you've gotten the feeling of metta, because it is an emotion, right? It's a feeling. The prayer helps you, give you the attitude, and you start like that. And then what you're learning to do is that feeling of caring, friendliness, you learn to stabilize it and then extend it out of loving and kindness, and then manifest it out in public. In your actions, it manifests as friendliness. But in your sitting practice, you learn to radiate that heart-based practice, free from enmity, free from enemy making in your mind, free from anxiety. The state is free from anxiety, free from distress, and wishing everyone actually reach a state of peace. It is a really, really good practice, and it does produce insight.
And while you're doing that, do you envision the beings that you're radiating this out to, or is the focus more on just the energy that you're...
You can do it by area, you can do it by individual, you can do it by groups. It is probably the most widely different ways of practicing of any teaching that I know of. So yes, the idea would be that you have a prayer that you use to keep yourself on track. Those words should be words that you understand. They can be changed, but it should be first something to do with not making envy, not carrying on dialogue in your mind about people you don't like. It builds up impossible barriers. Oh, that person that you dislike may not be anything like that once you get to know them, but you're going to have to do this toward Trump. You're going to have to do that. So what they would suggest, though, is that you actually start with yourself, and then your teacher or your best friend, and then maybe people downtown that you've met during the day, and then people that are in far parts of the planet, and then people who really you don't like. So you're taking it in little increments and not overstretched. That's one way. Another way is by areas, where you would start with your body, fill it up, then the room, and then stretch out the neighborhood. That would be without even directions. You can do it that way. And start including like Selkirk and Manitoba, Canada, until you could imagine the entire planet being filled with loving and kindness. Yeah. Or you can do it toward groups individually, like men, all the women, okay. Animals, deities, beings in states of deprivation. Okay, you can go through and say, and also you could. There are some encyclopedia of animals. Is there? Do you know the name of the animal encyclopedia? There's an encyclopedia that has pictures of all the animals that we know of on the planet, and it describes their habitat, where they are. There's a nice colored picture of them, what they eat, what they do, and you could also, as a way of making it more interesting, take a look at the animal and wish them to be free from ill will, free from anxiety and distress, and may they guide themselves to peace. You can go through each animal individually, like as a separate group of practices. So you have some leeway in how you actually go about practicing, but it starts in increments. You need to get the feeling first. You need to actually get this feeling of warmth in your being. And then you should do it to yourself until you feel good about yourself. These words, we know what they mean, and they stimulate feelings to say that. May I be well and happy last winter I spent 6 months alone in a little log cabin, as usual, out in the middle of the wilderness in the Yukon. Well, off to the side of the wilderness in the Yukon. And that's all I did was metta. Walking outside in the cold, walking back and forth on the creek, it was frozen. Saying that prayer out loud, walking. Then at the end of the walkway, I would stop and stand for 3, 4, 5 minutes and do the prayer again. Walk maybe an hour or two. Come back in the cabin, sit for a period, wash my socks, do another session, do a little bit of cooking, do another session, right? Divide the day up between activities that you need to take care of yourself, and I just did metta. That's all I did for 6 months. Really nice practice to do. So again, each one of the prayers is a little bit different. Compassion, gladness, equanimity, really. And then there's the 4 rupa jhanas. Boundless space, boundless consciousness, nothingness, neither perception or non-perception. I don't think you have to be too concerned about those. Those are extremely high level those are really high level practices. I have friends that are very good at doing those. They say they're very good at doing those. Seems to be another quality that people like to kind of brag a little bit or suggest they have some types of attainments, which they may or may not have, myself included. Although with me, I know that there's something that's changed for sure, because I can remember the old me, and I tell you, it's nothing like the new me. Well, really, I'm quite serious about that. So you can be very assured there can be drastic changes to the better in your life.
I don't even think you're the same Lama that we brought here 3 years ago.
No, I know. I keep growing. I keep changing. It keeps changing. I'm getting just. It's astounding how. Yeah, it's really good. I'll tell you, it's a really good way to live. There's a perception of repulsiveness and nutriment, which we talked about on Monday, which is the practice I'm developing now by studying modern diet, food intake, food uptake. You're using left and right side of the brain, because you're actually in the body when you're doing this. And if you develop jhana with it, actually one of the things that happens with it that's fascinating is you actually go inside of the body. You actually go inside the body. You actually see the things happening. Slightly different view than the slides you see in books, but you're there, you're inside of it. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's all lit up. Beautiful stuff happening. And the one defining is the element practice, also incredibly interesting practice, the element practice. And just to give you an idea of how these interlink here, the 32 part of the body practice, the first 20 are earth element, predominant. The last 12 are water element, predominant. So if you put your awareness in this, you'll notice that when you start doing awareness of the bones, when you get into those, you'll feel a harshness. You'll feel it. Your teeth and your nails. You actually go in and can feel them vibrating. Feel them vibrating. There's a frustration type of quality there, a heaviness, a roughness, where when you switch over to bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, there's a softness to it, a liquid to it, like that. Okay. So if you get good at identifying the four elements, earth, water, fire, and air, you can see what on a deep level of insight, these elements are changing with every mind state, and everything that strikes the senses that goes in through the door. If it's strong enough, it's called a door. So your window is there, but there's a door that opens up into the mind. If it's not a strong imprint, the door doesn't open up. But if it's a strong enough imprint that it actually registers in your body, there's a chemical change, and you can feel that by these different elements change in the body. The textures change in your body. For example, a hate state is very burning. All the joints in your body will hurt instantly if you go into a hate state. And the more sensitivity you have to these elements in your body, and the better you're training yourself in through very specific exercises to become very sensitive to these textures in your body that are actually how we experience the world through these. You'll notice that in the modern language of Vipassana, I keep saying it's a meditation on sensations. I think that's language. Is that right? Sensations. It's the awareness of sensations.
And the sensate field.
And the sensate field. This is a way of becoming more sensitive of the sensate field by doing these internal practices and becoming very sensitive, because eventually in your insight practices anyways, you're not going to actually have the words to a hate state. You're just going to be in the flow of these chemical changes. In fact, there'll be nothing happening, there'll be no breathing, all there'll be is a flow of these ever-changing sensations in the body That's one experience. That is a very deep experience. That's a direct experience of no self. Direct experience of no self. I stayed at a Benedictine hermitage, but their practice, their prayer practice, is something I've never read about on the internet or anywhere else. So I'm going to present to this as how they practice. They had a large book, big book, there on the shelf, there in their little prayer room. It was profiling 100 different types of human psyches, from robbers to murderers to the full range, business people. It was a very detailed description of those people's psyches, how they thought, how they attitudes, and what they would do. Their practice, this was their only practice as far as I know. I mean, they probably had some special holiday practices and that, but this was their daily before work practice, and daily after they come back, they would read one of these, and they would reflect on it and put themselves into that person's shoes, into that person's psyche, and then do a prayer for forgiveness and transforming idea. I guess pray, in this case, to God to forgive people like that. Interesting, isn't it, that was their practice. So that would be our Christian practice. I'm a reader of all the works of Saint Teresa of Avila. Well, she didn't write them when she was a saint, but she is a saint now, and her works are great. If you are interested in the spiritual path, she wrote a book called The Interior Castle. That's an excellent map of the spiritual path, what you go through on the spiritual path. It would be parallel or the same as the document in Theravada tradition called the stages of Vipassana. She does it in a book called The Interior Castle, outlining what she experienced on her path to what she calls perfection.
Compassion, awareness, and wisdom.
Om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani padme hum, om mani